Back to the Future, the animated series, episode 2 of Family Vacation. This episode involves the entire Brown family, minus Einstein, going back in time because pretty much at the very beginning of the episode, Doc is working on this machine. It ends up blowing the power to the whole house, and basically everyone's mad at him, and his idea was like, okay, well, if everyone has a problem, we should take a family vacation and kind of get ourselves away from technology. The problem with that is he didn't tell anyone that's what was happening. It was kind of like, we're going to go on this vacation way back to the old English days, and also I'm sending the DeLorean back to the future and it'll come and get us in like 6 hours. So they all get out of the DeLorean like, this sucks, and it's like, oh well, too late, because the DeLorean takes off and goes to the future. So Clara's mad at him, the kids are upset, and he's like, oh man, I really screwed up here. Naturally, they end up running into, some Biff, some Tannen from the bloodline until they're back in like, old England. So they run into Lord Biffingham, and he likes Clara. So she's, of course, from, well, I can't say modern day, but she's from the 80s. And so it's like, well, she finds this woman, like, washing clothes and stuff. And this dude comes along and he says all this stuff and was like, wash my clothes and do this and do that, or you won't get any food. And she's like, oh, my son, it ends up being this lady's son. And it was just crazy. It made Clara really mad. And then Lord Biffingham comes along as, the Tannen. And so it's like, okay, well, she's kind of, spunky, for that era. So it's like, all right, well, it's someone who's tough, but she's also very pretty. So he's like, screw it, I'll marry you. So he basically kidnaps her and takes off. Doc and the kids try to, follow after her. They end up getting split up because Doc gets captured. So he's taken to the castle as well. And the boys end up running into basically one of Marty's ancestors and like one of the McFlys. And so they end up working together. The kids go into the castle. Clara is trying to do her thing and survive. She ends up running into, I don't know if they actually specify it, but in this episode they actually introduce not only Clara, but they also have Jennifer for like a half a second. Like her and Marty are going to talk with Doc to like get the car or whatever. So they see them take off into the future, which seemed really willy-nilly to me. I thought they were like out in the fields. From the first episode, they make it seem like they're like out on farmland, and then in this one it was like there's a house like right next door, and I was like, that's very confusing, but that's a old 80s animation. You'll think they're in like a totally different type of location, and then the next episode is like, oh, there's like a department store right next to them. So they see them fly into the future, or just blast through time. So we get to see Jennifer early on in the episode, and then one of her ancestors, I'm assuming, because she looked exactly like her, she's also one of the girls that has been kidnapped by Lord Biffingham. So the two of them are actually planning to escape, while Doc is trying to basically joust against Lord Biffingham in order to, basically save his wife. And of course, with it being Biff, he cheats. Like, he has like this crazy giant golden suit of armor with like, he had a lance that was insanely long. And then they show Doc, and he's on like this wooden horse that, it doesn't even have wheels. It's just basically a wooden horse. It's like on a playground when you have those little spring horses. He was sitting on top of it, just stuck in place with like a pot and a pillow as his armor, and I think he had a stick. So it was like, that was their joust, like their fair duel. So it was pretty funny, but of course, he ends up being saved because the kids, end up rescuing them. Actually, Einstein did end up going with them because he was like the horse for their carriage. So he ends up kind of running in front of Biff. I'm just going to call him Biff. So he ends up running in front of him, and that throws him off the first time, and then the kids end up talking with each other, and it's like, okay, well, this is how we save Dad, because they were playing with like a train in a car, and they had the remote control car. So Jules hooks it up to the bottom of this little horse thing so that he can actually drive it around, and that's how they start to get things going for a better happy ending. And then as things continue on, he loses control of the remote control because Biff ends up running into him with the lance. But ultimately, everything kind of just works out fine, as any cartoon would have it, especially with this, with it being time travel. But ultimately, they're able to defeat Biff for like half a second. He's stalled. So Clara ends up, she like puts a bunch of like sheets together to climb down the window, and that's when Jennifer joins her. And that was pretty much it. They just climbed out the window and just, that was like, all right, let's go. And so with Biff being stalled and the ladies climbing out the window themselves, it was like, cool, everything's done. So everybody gets together and they all take off. And they actually have a hot air balloon, because as they're climbing down, they actually stop in. Once again, it's a cartoon, so it's impossible the amount of time that they took. But they actually make a hot air balloon out of quilts. And so not only did they rescue themselves by climbing out the windows first, Clara's like, hey, are you good with linens? And then she swings into a window, and that's when they make the hot air balloon, and then they escape and save everybody else as well. So they fly off, and then the family gets back to the DeLorean. You basically have Jennifer and Marty, they go off in a hot air balloon, which personally, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's going to mess up something with time because they just made a hot air balloon. But they end up getting back into the DeLorean, everything works out. They shoot back to the future, and everything's fine. It was a pretty decent episode. Like I said, we get to see Clara, we get to see Jennifer. Of course, there was a live action sequence at the end of this episode. They didn't have one in the beginning, which I thought was interesting. Like, the theme always kicks up before the actual show, but when it ended, it starts right at the animated portion, but they actually have Christopher Lloyd do an intro, and it's like literally one sentence, and it's like the story starts with Einstein walking down the street, and he basically says, like, this story begins after Einstein was done with like a dinner date or something with like the dog next door. It was like some weird stuff. He walked in and he put his hand on like a handprint screen, and then it let him into the house. But it was interesting. It was like, okay, that was a weird way to start it, but it was a pretty good episode. Gets to the end, they talk about hot air balloons, how you can make one yourself. Once again, you get to see Christopher Lloyd, go to Bill Nye the Science Guy, and it was just a cool little science experiment, so I really enjoyed it. The ending theme actually changes. I've watched a couple of episodes so far. I've only watched this one and the next one right after it. So the ending theme is different for every episode, so they have like old-timey music playing. I thought that was interesting, but I like this episode. We get to see the whole family, but it was pretty decent. You know, Marty doesn't show up too much outside of his, you know, the ancestor version of them, but of course they look exactly the same. Like, everyone looks the same no matter which, you know, if it's the actual character or their ancestor. All the characters have the same model, they're just in different clothing, and it's like they give them a different name. So it's kind of funny to see them because it's like there's no actual difference to the way they look, and it's just, you know, kind of like the movies to make fun of it. But it was a really good episode. I like seeing the whole family together, and Doc kind of screwed up in the very beginning, like, you know, we're just going to jump back in time, and you know, it's like, well, there goes the DeLorean. Like, every episode so far has introduced some new element of time travel. Like, the first time the limo turned into, or the DeLorean turns into like a limo. And this one, it's like, yeah, I already set it to like auto time travel, so it leaves and then it'll come back at night. Which, of course, it happens at the perfect time. The DeLorean comes back and they're able to leave. Another thing that was introduced is that they have basically like, he basically builds like an illusion machine where he blasts themselves. Like, they take a picture and it instantaneously transforms their clothes into that of the era. And it's like, yeah, this should be great, but it only lasts for like 8 hours or something. I was like, that's insane. And then of course it goes away perfectly when they get to the very, you know, very end of the episode. After all the time they spent running around and being captured and fighting, the images disappear and they're back into their normal outfits by the end of the episode. So every episode seems to introduce some crazy thing that either involves the DeLorean or involves it doing something else, or something that's useful based on them going in, you know, throughout time. So pretty interesting. There's another thing that's introduced in the next episode, but of course I'll talk about that in my next review. But it was a good episode, of course. If you happen to have seen the episode, I would love to know what you guys thought about it. If you guys have any random questions about this episode, anything you might have any interest in as far as, you know, anything I mentioned, or what, you know, anything I may have skipped, like, you know, minor things. If you have any random questions or anything you guys want to talk about in general about the series, please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.